So with the upcoming release of Spider-Man No Way Home on December 18th, oh yeah, I need to be taller. So when I was a kid, there were certain shows that I made sure that I was always awake for on Saturday mornings. One of them was Batman the Animated Series. Another one was Power Rangers, of course. And finally, the one that I never missed, Spider-Man the Animated Series. So I'm a bit of a Spider-Man fan. And with that being said, there's a brand new Spider-Man movie coming out on December 18th. Spider-Man No Way Home. So I thought it would be fun to do something for the occasion. What's up, everybody? My name is Tyler Stans, and this is What's Playing Tonight, where we will be taking a look at each theatrically released Spider-Man movie as we go on the road to No Way Home. Now, with that being said, unfortunately, I have it set up so that if I do each live-action Spider-Man movie per week, I will be done by the time No Way Home comes out. Unfortunately, that does not leave any room for the fantastic Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So, if you want my opinion on that, just real quick, it's great. It's probably the best Spider-Man film, and everyone should watch it. 4 ties. That's all I'm going to say about it. It speaks for itself. So on that note, we will actually be starting with 2002's Spider-Man, directed by Sam Raimi, starring everyone's favorite Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire. I remember, as I said, I watched that 90s animated Spider-Man show on TV when I was growing up, and that's kind of what got me hooked onto the character. So I remember in the early 2000s, let me take it back further. In the 90s, the only live-action superhero movies I were aware of, or that my parents would let me watch, were the Batman movies. And I think, as odd as it sounds, I started with Batman Returns, and I can't believe my parents let me watch that, thinking about it now. But I was much more exposed to Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. Yeah, I know. So I didn't know the difference between DC or Marvel. Maybe I did because I could see the logos on the cartoons I was watching, but when I found out that they were finally making a live-action Marvel movie that I could watch, because Blade was rated R. I know Blade was first, but my parents did not let me watch rated R movies until I was much older. But when I found out they were finally making a live-action one that I could watch, I was pretty excited to watch X-Men, because X-Men came first. And I didn't even have that much nostalgia for the X-Men. I was just at that right age that X-Men, the animated series, was kind of already in its own thing. And maybe it might not have even been on the air anymore by the time I was cognizant of what I was watching. I definitely watched it, but not as much as Spider-Man. So that came out, and I remember being a little disappointed as a kid with the first X-Men movie, because none of the characters looked like what they were supposed to. They all had black jumpsuits, black leather suits on for some reason. Wolverine was supposed to have a yellow suit with a blue mask. Cyclops was supposed to have a blue suit. You know, it was the 90s. Or rather, the X-Men I remembered were from the 90s. So in 2002, when Spider-Man came out, I was really excited for that movie because they nailed the look of that costume. He looks like Spider-Man. He they didn't put him in a black leather suit. I was really happy about that. So Spider-Man is directed by Sam Raimi. He actually directed all 3 of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, and this is his second trilogy, I believe, that he has under his belt, the first being the Evil Dead series. If you look for them, you might even see some references to Evil Dead when you're watching these movies. So I think that Sam Raimi was a good choice for the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy, the Raimi trilogy, really, because he brought that kind of, he didn't get to do it very much, but he was definitely able to insert some of his horror expertise and into the movie, all three of them. And he also made these movies, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but he made them really cheesy, and I think they work for that because it's a superhero movie. I mean, it's going to be a little cheesy. This was before the days of like The Dark Knight. X-Men wasn't too cheesy because they tried to have that political message, I guess, that the X-Men have always had. It's a metaphor for civil rights and stuff like that. So they kind of tried to take it seriously. But then, well,
Do you know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning? The same thing that happens to everything else.
So Spider-Man knew it was cheesy, and I think that made it better. Let's talk about let's talk about our main cast for a little bit. So we all know Tobey Maguire plays Spider-Man, Peter Parker, the first person theatrically to put on the suit. He is really good at playing an awkward person, and I don't know if it's on purpose or not. I don't know if he was trying to be awkward, but he comes across very awkward. So he's perfect for Peter Parker. I think where he falters a little bit is that Spider-Man is known for taunting his enemies and cracking jokes the whole time, and I think that's kind of where Tobey loses the edge. And I don't think his performance is that great in the first Spider-Man. There's some lines that, again, I don't know if it was intentional. They do come across awkward. Like anytime he's talking to Mary Jane, it's awkward. It's muted. He kind of talks, very muted. I don't know how else to say it. Speaking of Mary Jane, portrayed by Kirsten Dunst, she is fine. I know she has a bigger role in the next two movies. I mean, she is basically just a damsel in distress in, I think, all of these movies. They don't ever really give her any, I don't know, any moments where she's not a damsel in distress. She bounces off between Peter and Harry and the rest of the cast, and I don't know, she's fine. I don't really have much to say about her. Next up is Harry Osborn, portrayed by James Franco. Next up is Norman Osborn, portrayed by Willem Dafoe, who I think might be the main draw of this movie. He is certainly the person who is having the most fun in this movie. He is so over the top, and he has some of the best lines, some of them that have even become memes. Actually, I think most of his lines have become memes. And he does a good job at portraying regular Norman Osborn and the crazy Green Goblin. I believe that he is crazy when he is acting crazy on the screen. I believe it. We have Rosemary Harris as Aunt May. She's serviceable as Aunt May. Aunt May does these things in, I think, every single one of these movies where there's a point where she kind of has to give Peter a pep talk. And what she does is she tells him a long, boring story about when he was a kid, or about how when she was a kid. When she was a kid. Yeah, I said that right. We have the stupendous J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson, the editor-in-chief of the Daily Bugle, who has a grudge against Spider-Man before he even gets to meet him, really. And I don't know, as far as in the comics, I understand that he has a good reason for hating Spider-Man, but I honestly believe that in the Raimi series, J. Jonah Jameson kind of just hates Spider-Man to sell papers. Yeah, I think it's just more like, oh, he's selling papers whenever I put that he's a menace on the front of them. And yeah, that's why he does it. Because there's parts in the movie, in the later movies, where he kind of softens up on him a little bit, especially in Spider-Man 2. So I think it's kind of a facade, which is an interesting take on the character. And J.K. Simmons kills it. He's got some of the funniest lines in the movies, all three of them. We also have Cliff Robertson as Ben Parker. He is very... But Cliff Robertson is the person I think of when I think of Uncle Ben. I couldn't even tell you who played him in Amazing Spider-Man. We'll get to that. But yeah, Cliff Robertson's usually the guy that comes to mind when I'm thinking of Uncle Ben. I think he does a good job at portraying a positive role model for Peter, or at least he tries to, and he tries to be understanding, but of course Peter's off in his own thing, so he's not paying, he's not really paying him any mind. And I do think that it feels tragic when he dies. And yeah, and I think that some of the stuff that happens regarding Uncle Ben in the third movie in particular is really stupid. But we'll get to that. Well, we'll burn that bridge when we cross it, or something like that. The Daily Bugle gets some more supporting cast. We actually get Bill Nunn, Ted Raimi, brother of Sam Raimi, and Elizabeth Banks as the roles that they are in the Daily Bugle. I know Bill Nunn is Robbie Robertson. He's kind of the second in command at the Daily Bugle. Elizabeth Banks plays Betty Brant. She's the secretary that Peter unsuccessfully flirts with. And Ted Raimi plays Ted Raimi. I'm not quite sure what his job is besides to get yelled at by Jameson. And that's what happens in that movie. Let's talk about some cameos. There are a couple of cameos in this movie, and I don't know if all of them necessarily count as like the definition of cameos, but I'm including them in this section. Let's start off with Bruce Campbell, famous for the Evil Dead series and some other stuff, quite a bit of stuff, but I think probably most famous for the Evil Dead franchise. Bruce Campbell actually has a cameo in every Spider-Man movie, and I will point them out in every video. But in Spider-Man 1, he is the announcer at the wrestling rink who saves us and saves Peter from making a horrible mistake, because when Peter goes up there and Bruce Campbell asks him what his name is, his wrestler name, Peter gives him the Human Spider, which is not a great name, and Bruce Campbell rightfully tells him that he sucks, or that it sucks, and changes it to the Amazing Spider-Man. So that's how Spider-Man got his name in the Raimi universe, and that's canon. We also have, before Peter signs up to be in the wrestling, the person who registers him is actually Octavia Spencer. I noticed that when I was watching it today. That was pretty neat. And of course, the person that Spidey wrestles against is Bonesaw, played by the late Randy Savage, who does an amazing job. And I think, really, and then that's the cameo section. There's a lot of supporting characters, because in the Raimi trilogy, it's almost like the entire city of New York is a supporting character. And I don't mean like the city itself, like how some people say Gotham is a character. No, I mean like every person in the city is a supporting character in Spider. But yeah, in the Raimi movies, it seems like he really fleshes out the city of New York and makes it look realistic, makes the city look lived in. There's so much focus on all these side characters that I couldn't tell you the name. I don't know the names of the two people that are driving the boat to catch the kids at the end of the movie. I don't know who the people are. I don't know who the guitar guy in the subway who's singing a song about Spider-Man is. I don't know who the people that are throwing stuff at Green Goblin to save Spider-Man on the bridge are, but I remember them. I remember them. Let's talk about that music. Let's start out with there are a famous singer, Macy Gray, makes an appearance in the movie at the Unity Day Festival, hosted by Oscorp, of course. You know, maybe this says more about me than anything, or what kind of music I like, but I've never heard Macy Gray before in my life other than in Spider-Man. If you ask me who Macy Gray is, I would probably tell you, oh, she's the singer from the Unity Day Festival in Spider-Man. The next person we're going to talk about, during the end credits, we get a nice song from Chad Kroeger of Nickelback, and I can't remember the other guy's name, Josie Scott. The song Hero plays during the credits, and it's pretty much a Nickelback song. It really makes the movie feel kind of dated. It sounds like a song that was written for the movie. So yeah, I was kind of just kidding on the music section. Let's talk about Danny Elfman's score. Danny Elfman, also famous for scoring the Tim Burton Batman movies, returns to the superhero world with the Raimi trilogy, or at least the first two. And he creates the Spider-Man theme. And I don't know if it's necessarily iconic in a way that like John Williams' Superman or even Tim Burton's Batman has become. But I think it's iconic to me because whenever I think of Spider-Man, I either think of Spider-Man, or I think of Danny Elfman's theme. It's become synonymous with the character for me, but that is coming from someone with the nostalgia of growing up, watching that movie in theaters, having the VHS tape, and then the DVD, and now the Blu-ray. So your mileage might vary on how iconic you think that theme is. I think it fits really well. So let's talk about how faithful of a adaptation Spider-Man is. For the most part, I think it's pretty faithful. There are some gripes I have with it, and they're not really gripes, just things I'm just going to point out. One thing is a gripe. At the beginning of the movie, Tobey Maguire, James Franco, and Kirsten Dunst are supposed to be high school students, and I'm pretty sure they're around my age, and I'm like 29. I could be wrong about that, but they don't look like teenagers at all. The spider that bites Peter in the comics was a radioactive spider, but in this one, it's a genetically modified spider. And I don't know if that makes it more realistic or less realistic. Probably more, because radiation just doesn't do the things that comics seem to think it does. Green Goblin's costume. It looks stupid. It looks like a Power Ranger suit. I do believe whenever they were making this movie, they actually had like a makeup, or maybe they either had makeup or a mask made up to make him look more goblin-y like in the comics. And I don't necessarily think that looks good either. So I don't know how you make the Green Goblin look good, but it's not a big Power Ranger helmet, and it's not the mask that they had lined up. I do like they got his glider right for the most part. That looks like one of the most uncomfortable things to fly around on. Spider-Man in this movie has organic web shooters, so his web comes out of his wrists. That's not very true to the comics to an extent. I do believe that there have been points in comic book history where Spider-Man has had organic web shooters, but I think it's a good change for the movie. I think it changes it for the better because it just kind of streamlines everything for the audience. If he gets bitten by a spider and he gets the strength of a spider and he can crawl up walls like a spider, why can't he shoot webs like a spider? Well, the spider transferred its knowledge to him to make his own web fluid and devices to shoot that with. Or you can just have him shoot webs out of his wrists. I mean, I think it just kind of streamlines it, kind of cuts the fat a little bit. You Evil Dead fans might have noticed Uncle Ben's car is actually the same car that Ash Williams drives. That's nice. I didn't know that until I looked it up for information for this video. There is a scene in the movie where they almost celebrate Thanksgiving before Norman Osborn is a jerk, causing Harry Osborn to be a jerk. So Spider-Man is a Thanksgiving movie. Whenever Thanksgiving comes around, you can watch it with your loved ones and have a good time. I do think that the CGI in this movie has not aged well. Or rather, I don't know if it's aged well or if it was just always bad. The scenes at night aren't so bad, as usual, but the scenes during the day, particularly the ones at the festival, Spidey's first fight with Gabi, are not great. I do like the pumpkin bomb turning the board of directors into skeletons, kind of like the alien guns in Mars Attacks. But it makes me wonder how come every time he throws a pumpkin bomb after that, it doesn't just incinerate Spider-Man. But that's just me nitpicking. If you look closely, after Spider-Man saves Mary Jane in the festival, if you look closely, there's a close-up shot where it shows her holding on to him as they're swinging away. And if you look closely, Spider-Man is a mannequin in that scene, and her hair is blowing the wrong way. I think that's probably good for Spider-Man. Next week I'll be back for Spider-Man 2, and we'll continue on the road to No Way Home. I'm going to go ahead and give Spider-Man 3 ties out of 4. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you like my video, consider liking the video. If you like me, consider clicking that subscribe button and even clicking that bell icon. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite Spider-Man movie is, or what you like about this movie. I know a lot of people my age remember these movies pretty fondly, but tell me if you like it, tell me if you hate it. Until next time, I'm Tyler Stans, and this is What's Playing Tonight. You guys have a great rest of your evening, day, morning, afternoon. Bye-bye.
Shotgun!